So good morning everyone. My name is Maria HERMY, si TANTIADO, from Dalagangan Elementary School. And this morning, I will present to you the Proclamation number 1081, 1972 Educational Revolution. So, my learning objectives is to define the Proclamation number 1081, 1972. To enumerate the philosophy of education in the new society, to recognize the educational revolution during the period of martial law. So what is Proclamation number 1081, 1972? So here, our President Ferdinand E. Marcos signed the Proclamation number 1081 on September 21, 1972. Placing the Philippines under martial law. It was declared due to an existing threat to the Philippines government. The Philippine government set out to reform the country in a new social order which was called New Society. So after the declaration of martial law, the government officials, departments, military bureaus sat together for the implementation of the presidential order. All schools in all year levels, both in public and private, were temporarily closed, but was reopened on October 1972. So this is Ferdinand Emmanuel Idralen Marcos Sr., our 10th President of the Philippines, 1965 to 1986. He was born on September 11, 1917 and was died September 28, 1989. So his president term from December 30, 1965 to February 25, 1986. So he was in 21 years of his term or presidency in the Philippines. His spouse is Imelda Marcos. So, born from 1954, died 1989. Their children were Bongbong Marcos, Amy Marcos, Irene Marcos, and Amy Marcos. So, what is martial law? So, we'll define martial law. Martial law is an extreme and rare measure used to control society during war or periods of civil unrest or chaos. Martial law is the imposition of military power over designated regions on an emergency basis. Martial law also is usually imposed on a temporary basis when the civilian government or civilian authorities fail to function effectively. Example, maintaining order and security or providing essential services. When the disobedience of the law becomes widespread. Fundamentally, it is a requirement put on civilian government when they fail to function correctly. So, the education during the period of martial law. What is the education during the time? In 1972, Department of Education ang tawag. In 1978, Ministry of Education and Culture. In 1982, Ministry of Education, Culture, and Sport. So, a bilingual education scheme was established also in 1974, requiring English and Filipino to be used in schools. Then science and math as well as English language and literature class were taught in English while the rest were taught in Filipino. So the Educational Development Decree of 1972 was adopted with the aims to provide a broad base of general education for all citizens, train manpower in the middle skills, develop professional competence that can provide leadership and advanced knowledge, and make education more relevant through an educational planning service. So the philosophy of education in the new society. So first, the principles and practices of education under the new society is based on the pragmatic philosophy of education or progressive education. The child is the center of the educative process, and the child's growth and development is aimed in the progressive education. Activity programs in the line with the needs, interests, abilities of the pupil is the core of the curriculum. So the philosophy of education also in society, in this new society, the school program is integrated with life and activities of the community. Learning identified as a social process in which cooperation, group processes is utilized. Evaluating and guidance is a part in teaching and learning during this new society. Tawag sa una sa martial new society. So, the easiest way to comment about martial law and Philippine history classes about martial law is to describe the terrible legacy of the former and the tepid quality of the latter. It has been 3 decades since the EDSA revolution, but the tragedy is that a generation of young Filipinos remains largely ignorant of the narrative of martial law. These were only children during or born after that period and sheltered by parents who would rather not discuss what they had endured for so long. An even greater tragedy, however, is that there are many older Filipinos who experience martial law as adults and continue to support the memory of Ferdinand Marcos. So napo di ay no hantod karon. Within this category are Filipinos who either honestly do not know the extent of the excesses of the dictatorship or even benefited from Marcos' role and describe the period as the so-called golden era of Philippine history. What needs to be understood about education, especially in the context of martial law, is the fact that what we learn about history transcends the classroom. The policies and guidelines from government offices as fleshed out by authors is actually only one facet of how society reinterprets and transmits narratives. Education about history is found in how society chooses to remember or not to remember, and the social memory rather than history per se is what in turn shapes our actions and understanding of the past. The challenge of remembering this critical period in the Philippines history has never been greater, especially in this age of social media and pandemic. But the challenge must be faced. Dapat lang. So both for historical accuracy and justice, it is also important for the Philippines' integrity as a nation since its constitution highlights the values of human rights, democracy, and social justice. Values taken away from the Filipino people during the dark days of martial law. So thank you and keep safe everyone. So again, this is Maria HERMY TANTIADO, the reporter for the Proclamation of Martial Law and Education Revolution. The end. Bye-bye.